What's up, fam? It's your boy Demuir here, purveyor of all sounds underground. Thank you for joining me again on this YouTube Wednesday. This week I'm going to be presenting a bunch of different producer tips in my review or remake or just an overview or tutorial on my Derrick Does Disco first stanza. I've been asked by a number of different people since a number of folks have been playing the track out to do a video on it, so here goes. Before I jump into the tutorial, I want to thank all the people who've been supporting the track, especially folks like Cassy, who have been tremendous endorsers of the track, and first and foremost, of course, is Derrick Carter, who inspired the entire EP from my night in Chicago, listening to him play disco, or mostly disco, at Smart Bar in Chicago. It's just been amazing to have the song on Mixmag's mix CD for the month. Great endorsement from Cassy again, and to be on there with so many great folks. And thanks again for sending me this lovely magazine. You're looking good on it, girl. Keep representing. I really appreciate it. Let's get into the overview of the actual track. So, in terms of the inspiration, this track represented for me what was the peak in Derrick's set that night. He was playing mainly disco, and I remember the peak being where it felt like there's a bunch of people on the dance floor, and then there's this other rush that came about. And I had that inspiration with me when I went the very next day to Dave's Records in Chicago to, just go record shopping and find some samples, because I knew I was going to build the EP solely based on the influence and power of that night. And this is just shortly before he ordered like 18 pizzas for everyone to take in. So I knew I needed something lush with a beautiful set of disco strings and a bass line that would just carry people through the groove as it reaches there. And a lot of people told me when they play this track, it's like it totally works for peak or different elements of the set, but mainly peak, and people really feel the intention of that. But of course, with anything, it's got to be that groove. So when I first heard the sample, I'll just play you a few bars of the sample. Oh, it's really filtered here. Let's extend that. So I knew in listening to the sample there was a nice percussive element, and I had to find something that was in about the same range in terms of the groove and sound of it. So I was lucky enough to go into my library again, from digging for records and finding some unique sounds. I found this. I think I definitely got some I got some EQ on this. The low cut to 253 hertz. So this is what it sounds like with its kick in. And I cut that all out because I was just interested in emphasizing on the groove of the congas and the other percussive elements in there. You hear a triangle being beat throughout, and it just worked. And the other important thing that I want to point out here about the choice of samples is that those percussive elements were in key. So a lot of people talk about, your bass line's got to be in key, your keyboards have got to be in tune and in key with the other instruments. But it's very important that your congos or your bongos and other percussive elements are also in key. There's nothing worse than hearing something that just sounds completely off, and if it doesn't feel right to you sitting in the studio making it, I don't know how you think it will work in a club. The other important thing I'll say about the main loop and sample is that I come from a school of mono, and I've said this before in a lot of my other videos, that whatever tracks you're making has to translate to the club. So I know in this sample, and based on the way they made records back in the day, that a lot of things were panned to create additional tracks. So when it came to the final mixdown, I split this into 2 tracks. I have one hard pan to the left and another hard pan to the right, because each channel has different information that needs to translate into the club. If you just leave it dead center, you'll be dealing with phasing issues and whatnot. So there we have it, the percussive elements. We got the main sample going, and I know those things gel. The other thing about this track that really drew me in, because I wanted to replicate that peak hour element in Derrick's set, was the bass line, of course, and it's extremely important. This bass line, I'd say on this track, it's one of the few tracks where I actually didn't play over the bass line, and the reason for that is there's a beautiful sub kick in there along with the bass line that I just wanted to keep, and the overall tone of the bass line just brought a certain warmth to the track, and it just made sense. I mean, if I were to add my own bass in there, it just wouldn't sound right, because I wasn't there back in the 70s when this was originally recorded. So I'm just going to play the bass line just so you get a sense of how low in the frequencies and how much it's driving the groove, by bringing in a few other elements to give you a taste of, you know, what I'm talking about and why I believe it makes sense. Check it. So hopefully you hear this. It's quite low. Let's see how I EQ'd this. Oh, yeah. I'll show you a trick I did on this bass line. So it looks like it's hovering around pretty sweet between the 75 and 100 hertz. Is where that bass line is bouncing with that sub kick I was telling you about. Let's bring in the percussive element. See what I mean by everything being in key and it's just working? Yeah. Now I'm going to bring in the main loop, right channel, left channel. And that's the other thing about the sample choice here, is that the right and left channels of the sample, there are certain claps and snaps and other percussive elements happening in each channel. So when you separate them out, you hear them more in the mono world, as opposed to just trying to drive it through in stereo and you're dealing with those phasing issues. And, you know, the trick here with the bass line is I put a little boost in between that, you know, that 75 and 100 hertz range. I cut out all of the sub at 47 hertz because I wanted my own kick to sort of drive things in the track. And the other trick here that my boy Vince Ailey told me about, and I think I mentioned this in another video, is he's telling me about the Fatso, the EL7 Fatso Sr from UAD, and how that works perfect with filtered samples you're using as a bass line, and it totally works. Like if I solo out the bass here for a second, 1 second, I'm gonna take the UAD, the Fatso off. So check it right here. Hear how much lighter that sounds? It just doesn't even sound like the bass is there. So, you know, to have that in there really beefed things up and just made total sense for the track. Other thing I wanted to share was, you know, I think with tracks that work very well, sometimes less is more, and this is certainly a track that represents that, because the main loop and the bass line and the percussive piece that I just shared with you kind of carries the entire song. But you know, things can get a little bit boring after a while, so that's why I found another record, and it was an independent record by Cassy Brown, and at this time she's talking about introducing another song, and it's certainly how I felt when Derrick was at the peak of the set. So I'll just play.
Thank you very much. you. Thank you. And this is my first shout out, you dig it? So what I'm trying to say is I want y'all to applaud now. Yeah.
So I use that sample intentionally. I know as a DJ it feels great when you're bringing in a track that you really love and doesn't necessarily slam right into the beat after 8 bars. You get a chance to like ride it in the mix, and that's specifically why I did that, and it also adds some variation. And she said this catchy thing, I think she said something like, what I want y'all to do.
What I want y'all to do.
Yeah, right here. And then she said this other piece here that I thought was interesting.
What I want y'all to do, to give me the inspiration I need to do the tune.
To give me the inspiration that I need to do the tune. So that to me was describing the relationship between DJ and the audience, rocking to the spot, and certainly like that when from terms of how I remember the night with watching Derrick play these records, and it all just came together. So those are very simple vocal chops I put in there. You could see there's not much tracks here. There's, like I counted, I think there's about 12, 13 tracks. The other thing that I like to point out here, just to go back to the importance of the groove, and I know I've been talking about this a lot, but any way you can bring in a human element to your tracks is a perfect ingredient to bring into play, because it engages people, allows them to say, yeah, I'm feeling this, I can boogie along with it, and they're hearing it like it sounds very natural to them and to you. So this is basically 2 sounds. It's a clap and some finger snaps. And what I generally do is I usually quantize the clap on the 2 and 4 beat, and I have the snap similar but just slightly behind a 2 and 4. So it gives it more of a stereo element of fullness, and when you combine it with everything like these beat breaks here, you go back to the congas I was talking about, you can hear how it really feels spaced out, right? So taking the claps and the snaps out, put them back in, everything's just popping off. And then, you know, just to introduce certain elements or to let people know, hey, we're going to be taking the track to a certain place, I added, you know, the typical riser, but I did it pretty low, what you can hear here. One thing I want to share is, in terms of simplicity, is just around the kick. So I only put 1 kick in here. Sometimes I do 2 or 3 different kicks, you know, one for the sub and the attack and something in between to fill things out. And I didn't have to do that here because there's already enough sub kick in the bass line or the filtered bass of the sample. And then as the sample opens up after you filter it, you get a little bit more of the attack. So I knew I just needed to find a kick that would work in between the space. And one of the other tricks that I did was, instead of looking for a whole bunch of kicks and wanting to keep the sound consistent, you'll notice in the intro there's about 2 kicks in there, and it's basically the same kick.
Thank you,
but I took the velocity down by 20%, and then I went full blown when the filtered bass line and, you know, and the main sample and all of that came in. And I may have sidechained the main sample. Let me see if no, I didn't do that. So I guess I figured everything sonically just worked. And in order to get to that place of making sure I know things work, I'll just, you know, come over to the main channel and open up an EQ, just filter it right down and make sure I'm hearing my kick over the bass line. And if it's working here, I know it's going to work in terms of, you know, balancing the other tracks out. As long as I can hear my kick bumping, I knew that it would work, and it's perhaps why I decided not to deploy a side chain to things like most of us would do, because you just don't need to compress everything. The more you can allow things to breathe, it's a good thing. You get more dynamics out of your track, so less compression, the better. But you do need compression for certain situations, and it's basically looks like I lucked out here, and I didn't need it because I found the right kick against the filtered bassline sample to just make everything work with the other elements. I'm happy people connected to it and understood my degree of inspiration from it. I feel so lucky and humbled to have found these samples like the very next day in Chicago to make this record, and thank you for all of your love and support behind the track. I really appreciate it. I hope you got some tips from this, and there are things that you can actually deploy into your own productions. Much love and respect. Thank you again for checking me out and listening. Word up. All the best to you. Let's rock it away.